tie a wet fly for you today. This is the March Brown. This is in Ray Bergman's book on trout, and this is an English version of the March Brown wet fly. More specifically, it is the male version. I wanted to tie this because I thought it was kind of interesting that there was both a male and a female version of this. I'm not going to do the female, but I will talk about the difference between this and the female version when I'm tying the fly. Simple fly with some Hungarian partridge, a dubbed body, and ring-necked pheasant, male ring-necked pheasant in the wing. And that is the March Brown English male. And I'll get started. I'm going to start the March Brown by placing my hook in the vise. This is a Mustad 3399, size 8. Debarb the hook. I'll attach my thread. For thread, I'm using a Danville 6/0 in black. I don't have a floss body or anything on this, so I don't have to worry about darkening up anything. It is a dubbed brown body of rabbit hair is what I'm using, so I can just use black thread throughout the whole thing. Put some wax on my thread. And I'll attach my thread about an eye length behind the eye of the hook. And I'm going to bring it down all the way to just past the point. There is a tip on this, and it is a gold tinsel. I'm using for this size hook, this is a Danville size 16 and 18 silver and gold tinsel. I'm going to tie this in with the silver side up so that it will flip over to gold. The rib is also the same tinsel. I'll bring the tinsel underneath the thread over to my side. Got just a little bit of thread. I broke that off right there. There we go. I'll bring that so that the tip is just past where I wrapped that in. I should have put another wrap on it, and it would have secured it. It wouldn't have fallen out like that. Another wrap, there you go. Now I'll bring this down where it's just almost, I'm just poking outside those wraps. Put in a couple more wraps to secure that. And turn the hook over and start my tip. I'm going to put about 6 wraps down and 6 wraps back up to form the tip. Screwing that in. I'll trim away the excess. Also don't have to worry about a super smooth body up here because of the dubbing, but you do want to try and minimize your thread wraps. For the tail, I'm going to use it calls for Partridge, and it's just a few barbs off of a darker Partridge hackle. So these are taken right off the rump so that the barbs are a little bit longer and it's nice and dark color. This is a male version, as I had already mentioned. There is a female version of this fly, and it has lighter colored barbs. The major difference, it does not have a tip on it, and it's lighter barbs and a lighter colored wing. I'm going to measure those about a shank length long. Secure those down to the hook, a few wraps. So those are just sticking out the back. My rib is the same tinsel. I'm going to attach my rib, bringing it all the way under, and I'm going to bring it so that the end of that is just inside the body. And then we can start dubbing. The dubbing, as I mentioned, I'm using a rabbit. This is a dark rabbit mask. Essentially what I've done is taken some of the fur off of a rabbit mask that was really dark, put it together and blended it so that overall it's got the guard hairs in it and it's got mostly the underfur, but it has a darker color to it. I'll put a little bit of wax on my fingers, and I want a fairly sparse, thin dubbing noodle. I don't want to make a big thick body on this. I just want to keep it pretty thin. Make about a 3-inch dubbing noodle. I'm going to go ahead and apply it and see where that leaves me. Might have to occasionally, as I'm wrapping this in, I want to just keep a level body. I might have to stop occasionally and twist that up just a little bit. And that puts me just right where I want to be, about an eye length behind the eye of the hook. I don't have to trim these longer ones out. That's part of the reason I chose the rabbit mask, to get some of those guard hairs in there. I will apply the rib, 5 evenly spaced wraps. Right. The 6th wrap will come right up on side of the head space. And that will complete the body for our March Brown. Clean this up a little bit. I am a little bit closer to the eye because I'm going to tie in the wing here, and there's a hackle. This March Brown version has the wing tied on and then the hackle over it. So for the wing, I'm going to be using some dark pheasant. I find that these are secondaries from a male ring-necked pheasant. They're a little bit darker. So I'll cut away a slip that's a little bit less than the width of the gap of the hook. Peeling that off, I'll match up with the other side. Set that up so the tips are about the same. Peel that off. I'll match these up. As you can see, I've got one side is obviously wider than the other. I want to get my tips matched up first. Then I will reach in with my bodkin and peel out the excess from the other side. And that should give me a nice dark colored mottled wing. Replace that in. Notice it's about a little more than half the gap of the hook. You could go a little wider if you want. Replace that in so the tips just a little more than halfway down the tail, because when I put this in with that dubbing behind it, it's going to kick up just a little bit. Now, what just happened there often, I can't say often happens, but sometimes does happen. And what happened was, as I was pinching this and holding it, getting ready to do that pinch wrap, I took the thread over on this side, but when I brought it back down, it went on my side of the hook. So I didn't get around the hook. Something got to be careful of every now and again. Take my time here. Pull that on down. Getting a few wraps in to secure it as I work a little bit towards the eye. I don't want to go back. Well, that wing just got destroyed. So I'm going to try a couple more slips here. I've got a couple more slips here. These are a little bit thicker. I think the other ones were too thin. Got those tips evened up. I'm going to thin this down just a little bit. So these are about the gap of the hook. There you go. Don't be afraid to do that. Sometimes you get these and just handling them or soft spots in the feathers, who knows what, when you tie these in, they get cut, they break apart. The wing just isn't the way you want it to be. Don't be afraid to cut out a new set of slips and just try and redo that wing to get just what you're looking for. Trim away the excess. Now, see how that dubbing back behind there has kind of kicked that wing up so that the point of that wing is now about halfway down the tail. Now, in the water, that's going to still come down a little bit like this. So if you wanted to, you could have that a little bit shorter. I'm going to smooth this area off for my hackle. Notice I'm still fairly close to the eye of the hook. I don't want to be that far away from the eye of the hook because this hackle is going to get tied in. And then I'm going to use the head of the fly to kind of angle those hackles back. For the hackle, I'm using also some Hungarian partridge. This is more of a shoulder feather just because it's a nice dark color. I like the coloring on that. I only need a couple wraps, so I'm going to strip away the light fluff here. My chief concern with this is that the barbs, when I wrap this in, the barbs are going to be long enough to go about from that collar to the point of the hook or just a little bit past. Dropped my hackle pliers. I'm going to grab my hackle pliers and just grab the tip of this. When I do that, I can stroke down the barbs in a reverse direction to open up the tip of that feather. I can just clip off, leaving just a small little triangle to tie in right here where the hackle is going to be in the head space, leaving my thread right behind the back end of the head so it will help kind of push the collar backwards as I'm wrapping it in. I'm going to stroke these hackle fibers rearward as you wrap down. In this case, I'm going to get the 3 wraps, and it's going to give me pretty much the whole feather. Tie that in, and you'll notice I'm right up almost behind the eye of the hook. And the reason for that is I'm going to sweep these back, come down to the eye of the hook, and then start wrapping in backwards. So I'm using the head on this as a means of pressing those barbs in a rearward orientation. You could pop this off. If it doesn't pop off, then just go ahead and cut it off. I have had situations where I tried to pop that off and I actually broke my thread. So with the head all made, I will flatten my thread and put in my whip finish. Don't need a whole lot of hackle right around the front here because you're just wanting these barbs will all kind of split up and fan out as this is fished. And they're just looking like nymph legs or something like that as the whole thing is fished through the water and swung through the water. All of this is going to come to life and just float around and look like a lot of legs. So you don't need a whole lot. There we go. Get some head cement on both sides here. And in a moment, I'll come back and put some black lacquer on that to finish that off just a little bit. You don't have to. If this is just going to be a fishing fly, you certainly don't have to do the black lacquer on it. Especially this is kind of like, you're wanting this to look like a nymph. But I'll go ahead and put some black lacquer on it in a little bit. So that is the March Brown English version and the male. As I mentioned before, the female does not have the tip on the end. The tail hackles as well as, actually I don't think it doesn't have any tail on it either, but the body and the wing are all just a little bit lighter Hungarian partridge. So there's the March Brown English. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.